Hi there Star Wars collectors, and welcome to another Bossk Bounty video, and welcome to episode 7 of Finish the 96. This is the mini-series where I take a look at 5 vintage Kenner figures that Hasbro still need to release in the modern vintage collection. As always, if you're new to the series, it might be best that you go back to episode 1 to find out a little bit more about the history of the original 96 and why I'm doing this series. If you're a regular viewer to the channel, you will know that we ended episode 6 discussing C-3PO with removable limbs. So before we get started, if you wouldn't mind just dropping a thumbs up on this video to let me and YouTube know that you are enjoying the video, and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Alright then, with all that being said, let's get started with Greedo. Now we do already have a pretty decent Greedo, and he was released on a vintage Kenner card back. He was part of the Vintage Saga collection in 2006, but is yet to exist in the vintage collection proper. The figure itself in the most parts has all the required articulation and is a good representation of the character. The only issue is the vest. For some reason the vest is made of a kind of velvet material which isn't accurate to the character, and I know that many collectors chose to swap this out with the soft plastic vest from the original Trilogy collection version. If you want to pick Greedo up, he is usually a pretty inexpensive figure on the secondary market, and when Hasbro do get round to the vintage collection version, I wouldn't be surprised that they straight repack this figure with an updated vest. That would certainly be another clue that they are listening to the fan base. Next on the list is Bespin Leia, which we already have. She is VC 111 in the line and was released in 2012. So we move on to the Rebel Commander. Now this is one of those contentious and confusing ones, so you might want to strap yourself in. The vintage Kenner Rebel Commander is another example of the figure not matching the card back. The guy pictured on the card back is Jeroen Webb, and you will notice that he doesn't sport an 80s adult movie star moustache, which the figure most certainly does. Because of this, there was always the debate on who the figure is actually based on. Now there are a few candidates. Some people believe it to be number 1 in this image, which unfortunately is an unnamed character. Others believe it to be Major Brenderlin, which fits in terms of the moustache and goggles, but the outfit doesn't seem to match. He is wearing more of a light brown tunic similar to General Raikin. Then we have the guy in image 3, Colonel Ledick Firest. He has the goggles and the tash, but something doesn't look right in his overall outfit. And lastly, we have image 4, which again is an unnamed character. This for me would be a perfect match in terms of tunic, scarf and facial hair, but he doesn't have the goggles. Maybe he just took them off for a bit, because this for me is the most likely candidate. In the modern vintage collection, Hasbro released a 3-pack which included a Rebel Commander. However, this was a mistake and the figure was later repacked on a single card and correctly named Rebel Soldier. So what do Hasbro do here? Make a figure which matches Jeroen Webb, or keep the mistake and give us Colonel Ledick Firest or an unnamed Rebel Commander? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. That's if you care, of course. Moving on, next on the list is Lobot, which will be included in the next wave of the vintage collection, so we can tick him off right now. So we move on to Han Solo in Hoth. There have been multiple different attempts at this figure with varying degrees of success. This also isn't the first time he has been on a vintage style card or in the vintage collection proper. The Han Hoth version in 2007's Vintage Saga collection isn't actually that bad. It's a nice sculpt, but what I find strange is the extra hat that is included. I would have much preferred a swappable head with the jacket hood up. This is how the figure was presented when he was included in the vintage collection in a 3-pack. Now I believe this particular version was a repack of a figure released in the Legacy collection. You could pick him up in the Hoth Recon Patrol Battle Pack or a Droid Factory 2-pack. Either way, I feel a combination of the two would be perfect. Now the card back isn't an issue. The vintage Kenner version was used for the Vintage Saga collection, and I have no doubt will be used for when they release him in the vintage collection proper. Next on the list is the Attack Commander, which we already have, so we move on to the Imperial Stormtrooper. Now I find it very hard to believe that we still do not have the Stormtrooper on a Star Wars card in the modern line. This is a first 12 figure and one of the most iconic card backs in the Kenner line. In the vintage original Trilogy collection, Hasbro chose to release the Stormtrooper on a Return of the Jedi card back, and then when the figure was updated and released in the vintage collection, they put him on both the Empire Strikes Back and the Return of the Jedi card backs, with a Revenge card variant to boot. The figure itself is showing its age, especially when comparing it to the most recent Rogue One Stormtrooper or the version released in the carbon freezing chamber. What we need is a definitive A New Hope version with the correct armour, helmet and holster on a classic Star Wars card. Next up is the Echo-based Rebel Soldier, which we already have and is being re-released in the next wave of TVC. So we move on to the final figure of this episode, and man, it's a biggie. Princess Leia Organa on a Star Wars card. Once again, another figure released in the 2004 Vintage Original Trilogy collection, and one that is badly in need of an update. I really hope and pray that when they get round to doing this figure, that they get the head sculpt right. We need that definitive Princess Leia, something that resembles Carrie Fisher. I also don't envy the designers when trying to decide whether the figure should include soft or hard goods. Of course, there is an argument for both styles. I just hope they get it right, because in my opinion, even the 6-inch scale version isn't great. So for me, when they finally do Princess Leia Organa on that Star Wars card, they have to 100% nail it, because we don't want to be waiting another 17 years for them to do an update. So there you go then guys, that's 5 more figures that Hasbro need to make to go towards finishing the 96. Join me on next week's episode for the next 5 as we get closer to the end of this mini-series. As usual, thank you all for watching, and thank you all to my Patreon supporters and channel members. Your support for my channel is much appreciated. Alright then folks, thanks for watching, and we shall see you on the next one.